As women move beyond the milestone of 60, many begin to notice subtle yet undeniable changes in their bodies, especially when it comes to intimacy. And while society often portrays aging as a decline in desirability or sexual function, the truth is far more complex and layered, because in reality, what happens to a woman's body after 60 during intimacy is not simply a matter of slowing down, but a combination of fascinating physiological shifts, hormonal adjustments, emotional awakenings, and sensory adaptations that can either enhance or challenge her intimate experiences depending on awareness, health, and mindset. And to understand this, we have to start with the most influential factor: hormonal changes, since by the time a woman reaches her 60s, she is well past menopause, meaning estrogen levels have dropped significantly. And estrogen, as you may know, plays a vital role in maintaining vaginal elasticity, natural lubrication, and healthy blood flow to the pelvic region. So, with reduced estrogen, the vaginal tissues may become thinner and less elastic, a condition known as vaginal atrophy, which can make intercourse feel different, sometimes less naturally lubricated and more prone to discomfort if no adjustments are made. But this doesn't mean intimacy becomes impossible or unenjoyable. In fact, for many women, learning to work with these changes, using lubricants, natural oils, or prescribed estrogen creams, can restore comfort and even create a new sense of exploration as they adjust to their body's evolving needs. And at the same time, testosterone, though present in smaller amounts in women, also declines with age, and because testosterone contributes to sexual desire, its decrease can influence libido. Yet desire after 60 is often less about raw hormonal drive and more about emotional connection, sensual touch, and mental arousal. Meaning intimacy can actually feel richer and more deeply satisfying when approached with patience and presence, rather than urgency. And another profound shift is in circulation and blood flow, since aging arteries may not deliver blood to the pelvic region as quickly or fully as before, which can reduce the intensity or speed of arousal. But this also means women often require more extended and attentive foreplay, something many partners find actually enhances intimacy because it fosters connection and anticipation rather than rushing to the main event. And while these internal changes are occurring, external sensory responses are also subtly shifting. Skin becomes thinner and nerve endings may become slightly less sensitive in some areas, yet paradoxically more sensitive in others, meaning certain types of touch may feel more pleasurable than before while others require a gentler approach. And for some women, breasts may lose firmness due to reduced estrogen and collagen, but they can still be highly erogenous zones if stimulated in a way that respects their changing sensitivity. And psychologically, intimacy after 60 is often colored by decades of experience, self-awareness, and emotional maturity, which can make a woman far more confident in expressing what she likes and doesn't like, a confidence younger women often lack. Yet there can also be lingering insecurities about aging bodies, from weight gain to wrinkles to sagging skin. And these self-conscious feelings can sometimes create barriers to arousal unless addressed with reassurance, self-love practices, and a partner who values her wholly. And another fascinating point is that the brain's sexual response, the release of oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins, remains intact well into older age, meaning pleasure and emotional bonding are still entirely possible and can even feel more profound. Because with fewer distractions like young children or career stress, women often have more space to fully enjoy the moment. And of course, we cannot overlook the importance of pelvic floor health, since muscles naturally weaken with age, which can affect both bladder control and sexual sensation. But women who engage in regular Kegel exercises or other pelvic strengthening routines often report stronger orgasms and improved overall control during intimacy. And these changes, whether hormonal, physical, or emotional, are not signs that intimacy should end after 60, but rather invitations to explore it differently, to embrace slower, more intentional experiences, to communicate openly with a partner about needs and preferences, and to view intimacy as a form of health, vitality, and joy rather than something reserved for the young. Because the truth is, what really happens to a woman's body after 60 during intimacy is not a loss of capability, but a transformation into a new, more mindful form of sexual connection that, when approached with understanding and adaptability, can be every bit as fulfilling, if not more so, than in her younger years. As intimacy unfolds, another significant transformation many women experience after 60 involves the subtle but important changes in circulation and how it affects sexual sensation and arousal. While youthful sexual response can sometimes be rapid and intense, the post-60 experience is often more like a slow rising tide rather than a sudden wave, requiring extended time and gentler, sustained stimulation for the body to fully respond. This is not a sign of loss, but rather a shift in the way the body prefers to be approached, a preference for quality over speed, for deep emotional connection and mental engagement before the physical side fully awakens. With the natural slowing of blood flow due to cardiovascular aging, the tissues of the vulva and clitoris may take longer to become engorged, and some women may notice that direct, intense touch too early feels overwhelming rather than pleasurable. However, when approached with patience, through extended kissing, caressing, whispered words, or non-genital touch, the body begins to warm, the skin grows more sensitive, and the subtle signs of arousal become unmistakable: soft gasps, shifting body language, gentle arching of the back. This slower process actually deepens the experience because it allows more time for the mind to relax, the heart rate to rise gradually, and the body to build toward more lasting and satisfying sensations. Hormonal shifts after menopause, particularly the drop in estrogen, can also lead to vaginal dryness, which is why lubrication becomes not just helpful but essential for comfort and pleasure. Many women in their 60s and beyond find that using lubricants made with natural ingredients or silicone-based formulas dramatically enhances sensation and removes the subtle tension that can come with anticipating discomfort. This attention to comfort and readiness is part of what makes post-60 intimacy so rich. Partners often communicate more openly, touch more deliberately, and create a rhythm that honors both physical needs and emotional closeness. Another often overlooked change is how the body's erogenous zones evolve with age. Areas such as the neck, ears, inner thighs, and even the small of the back can become far more sensitive than they were decades earlier. These changes mean that a woman's body after 60 is not less capable of pleasure. It is simply wired differently, craving a layered, multisensory experience rather than a narrow focus on one area. The combination of mental connection, tactile exploration, and a safe, loving environment creates the hormonal and neurological conditions for deeper satisfaction. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, is released during gentle, affectionate touch and is particularly powerful in older couples, helping reduce anxiety, lower blood pressure, and create a sense of emotional security that makes arousal easier to achieve. This interplay between mind and body becomes even more important with age because, unlike in younger years where physical attraction alone can spark desire, post-60 intimacy thrives on the fusion of emotional trust and sensory engagement. Many women discover that with these changes comes a surprising freedom. They feel less pressure to perform, and more freedom to explore what genuinely feels good without comparison to a younger self. And because arousal after 60 is often more deliberate, the pleasure that follows tends to last longer and feel more complete, with a lingering afterglow that can last hours or even days. Another important aspect that many couples don't openly talk about but deeply influences a woman's body and experience after 60 during intimacy is the gradual change in the way her pelvic floor responds to arousal and stimulation. In her younger years, the pelvic floor muscles may have been able to contract with strong reflexes during orgasm, creating that intense pulsing release. After 60, especially if she's had children or led a life without regular pelvic exercises, those muscles may weaken, leading to less intensity in contractions, which can slightly dull the climax experience. This isn't a sign of something wrong, it's simply the result of decades of use and natural aging of muscle fibers, much like what happens with other muscles in the body. But here's the beautiful part. Women who actively engage in targeted exercises like Kegels or even explore pelvic floor therapy can literally retrain and rebuild that strength, leading to sensations that sometimes surpass what they felt in their 30s. This muscle revival not only improves orgasms but also increases blood flow, which enhances natural lubrication and sensitivity. At the same time, the brain's role in intimacy becomes even more pronounced. After 60, many women find that their arousal is less about instant physical reaction and more about mental and emotional connection. The skin's nerve endings may be slightly less sensitive, but the brain, the body's largest erogenous zone, takes on a more significant role in amplifying pleasure. A loving touch, deep eye contact, slow buildup, and emotionally safe intimacy can create a cascade of dopamine and oxytocin release that counterbalances the physical changes. This is also when many women experience what's sometimes called the deepening of arousal, where instead of a quick rush to climax, they sink into a more meditative, full-body experience. The sensations might not be the same as when they were 25, but they can be richer, more layered, and even more satisfying. Another fascinating shift is in the way the body's chemistry affects desire. Post-menopause, testosterone levels in women drop significantly, which can contribute to reduced spontaneous desire, but it doesn't mean the capacity for passion disappears. In fact, some women notice that once they adapt to the hormonal changes, they feel more liberated because they're no longer under the cyclical influence of fluctuating estrogen and progesterone. The freedom from monthly hormonal swings can bring a stable emotional baseline that supports more intentional intimacy. Additionally, blood vessels in the genital area may take longer to dilate fully, meaning it's even more important for her partner to engage in extended foreplay, not as a chore, but as a delicious exploration. This extra time allows the tissues to swell, the nerves to activate, and the body to fully switch on, creating more comfort and avoiding the discomfort that can occur if things happen too quickly. Interestingly, many women after 60 find they begin to explore forms of pleasure they never considered in their youth, perhaps due to reduced inhibition, a better understanding of their bodies, or simply more time to focus on what feels good. They may be more open to using lubricants, warming gels, toys, or new positions that reduce pressure on joints and enhance sensation. This adaptability is a key reason why intimacy in later life can be even more satisfying than people expect. The skin itself changes, becoming thinner and sometimes more fragile, which means that gentle, mindful touch often feels more loving and more intimate than rough or hurried contact. When partners slow down, it not only prevents discomfort but also increases anticipation, allowing the brain to build pleasure in layers rather than relying solely on physical friction. This is also when the role of aftercare, the moments after intimacy, becomes more powerful. Gentle cuddling, stroking, or simply lying together prolongs the hormonal afterglow, reinforcing connection and making the next intimate experience even more inviting. From a biological perspective, while there are undeniable changes to moisture levels, elasticity, and circulation, the body after 60 still retains the incredible ability to adapt and respond, especially when the woman feels emotionally cherished, physically respected, and mentally engaged. In fact, research shows that older women who maintain a healthy sexual relationship often have better sleep, lower blood pressure, reduced stress hormones, and even improved cognitive function compared to those who do not. So, the changes that occur aren't signs of loss. They're signals for a new rhythm, one that rewards patience, creativity, and deep connection in ways that many women wish they had appreciated decades earlier. And perhaps the most profound change in a woman's body after 60 during intimacy is not just physical or hormonal but emotional, because after decades of lived experiences, relationships, heartbreaks, joys, and self-discovery, she begins to connect with her partner and herself in a far more authentic way, shedding the insecurities of youth and the need to perform or meet unrealistic standards, replacing them with a quiet confidence and an appreciation for intimacy that transcends appearance. Yet this emotional depth can be transformative for the physical side as well, because when a woman feels truly safe, valued, and loved, her body responds more openly. Stress hormones like cortisol drop, oxytocin rises, and muscle tension eases, making arousal and pleasure more accessible despite the natural changes in blood flow or hormonal levels. And this is where communication and vulnerability with a partner become vital, because when she can openly express her needs, whether that means more time for foreplay, the use of lubricants or toys, softer lighting, or a slower pace, It removes barriers and allows the body to relax into the experience. But beyond technique, the deeper truth is that intimacy after 60 is a celebration of endurance and adaptability, as women often discover that while their bodies may not react exactly as they once did in their 20s or 30s, they can experience a different kind of pleasure, sometimes deeper, slower, more full-bodied, a kind of pleasure that lingers long after the moment ends. And partners who understand this shift often find that their own satisfaction grows as well, because the focus moves away from rushing toward climax and more towards savoring every sensation, every touch, every glance, so the post-60 intimate experience can become richer in ways younger couples may not yet understand. But this requires letting go of outdated ideas that sexual energy inevitably fades to nothing with age, because in reality, for many women it changes shape rather than disappearing, transforming into a softer but more enduring flame that can be fanned by emotional connection, mindful touch, shared laughter, and even small acts of daily affection, like holding hands or kissing for no reason. And when this emotional closeness is paired with practical awareness, such as addressing any pelvic floor weakness through targeted exercises, keeping vaginal tissue healthy with moisturizers or estrogen therapy when appropriate, and staying physically active to keep blood circulation strong, it creates a synergy where the body is supported and the heart is engaged, allowing intimacy to remain not just possible but deeply fulfilling. And for many couples, this stage of life can bring a renaissance of passion, because without the pressures of raising children, building careers, or living up to unrealistic beauty ideals, there is more freedom to explore fantasies, try new sensations, and rediscover each other with fresh curiosity. So, the reality of a woman's body after 60 during intimacy is not a story of loss, but of evolution, a chapter where pleasure becomes less about urgency and more about depth, less about perfection and more about authenticity. And in this space, the body and soul can meet in a harmony that younger lovers rarely achieve, proving that intimacy in later years is not the end of desire but the doorway to a more profound and lasting kind of connection that continues to nourish both partners long after the bedroom lights go out.